Folks, after that interview with Bret Baier, I don't think we have any doubt that for her, the basement strategy was not just necessary, but like a matter of political life and death. And after that interview, Kamala's campaign is in hospice.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about? When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. You called Donald Trump he's misguided. You say now
he's
unstable.
He is unstable, Brett. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
You're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
So what I loved most about that interview, artfully conducted by Bret Baier, a legend, is that he entered her in the first 15 seconds, but he did it by simply asking a question and then letting her answer. And that's all it took, folks. Kamala imploded like Chernobyl, and all it took was just a couple of questions and the replay of her in her own friggin' words. She was visibly angry and visibly empty at the same time, something that's actually quite hard to achieve. It was art. It was pure art. All I'll say is it's damn good for her team that this was her first and probably her last interview on Fox News, because she simply could not withstand more than one. And some would say, I'm the sum, that she is done for after that. Absolutely done for. Here with his take on that and more is OutKick writer Bobby Burack. Bobby, it's great to have you on the show.
Tommy, happy to be here. I've been following you for a while. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And you know what? I thought last night that was an Emmy award-winning performance by Bret Baier. He didn't have to do a whole lot, to really put her on her heels, but she's never faced that before. And I'm wondering what your initial takeaway is from watching that. I think was 25 to 28 minutes of just pure art.
Well, she resembled exactly what she is, and that is somebody who has never really been challenged. Going through her entire career, when she ran for president in 2020, she actually bowed out of the race before the calendar turned to 2020. She had such little support. She didn't earn her way to be vice president. She was chosen because the party limited Biden's options down to women of color. And she most certainly did not earn the nomination this time around. She was installed, and she looked like somebody who has never been held accountable, never had to answer a tough question. And she really hasn't. Her last minute media blitz has been with Howard Stern, The View, Charlemagne the God. So when you go from them to Bret Baier, it's a pretty rude awakening. If I were one of her advisors, I would have set her up with somebody who is mildly challenging before throwing her in front of Bret Baier, who I thought did an excellent job. Because here's the key, Tommy. The hardest questions to answer are simple questions. He didn't ask her hard questions. They were pretty simple. How many illegal aliens do you think enter this country? And that simple question, she could not answer.
She couldn't answer. She didn't want to answer. She had no answers. And of course, she's used to just being able to say, okay, you're going to get a question on the border, talk about the bipartisan border bill, and talk about how Donald Trump killed it because he wants to run on a problem instead of a solution. She's got that rehearsed line. She thought she was going to feed that to Bret Baier. She thought she was going to say, within hours of the Biden administration, we put forth a comprehensive immigration bill. And then he hit back immediately and was like, yes, here's the bill. And it was essentially a pathway to citizenship. And she's like, oh, what am I going to do now? Because he actually knows the bill I'm talking about. He knows it's a load of BS. He's going to throw that back at me. And I don't have any canned lines left because I used them all. I already shot my load. What am I going to do? That was exactly how she felt in that moment. And you could see it all over her face. And, you know, of course, the mainstream media is going to run to her defense. Some, of course, on MSNBC think that it was sexist, that he interrupted her with the facts. Of course, some are going to say that she did an excellent job being challenged like that so horrifically. But I think if everybody's honest, they know that that was a complete and utter disaster. And I want to know what you make of the fact that Bret Baier said, and you could actually see it in that interview, that her team was desperate to end it, that they wanted a hard rap and they were about ready to like parachute in there and pull her out. What do you think it's like for Team Kamala in the aftermath of that interview?
So this has actually been a continuation of a trend ever since she took over as vice president. The Washington Post had an op-ed around March or so this year about how much of a headache she is for her staff. There are really three things that they have gripes about. She comes unprepared, she blames them afterwards, and she struggles to make it through any challenging event. And we saw all three of those. I thought Kamala looked very unprepared last night. I mean, you brought up the highlight. She is so used to saying Donald Trump killed the bipartisan border bill. Well, what about your administration using so many executive orders to, quote unquote, kill a very successful border policy, which it was under President Trump? She had no comeback to that. And that goes to being prepared. If you're a politician, you know you're heading to a challenging interview, you have to know, okay, he might hit me with this, he might come back here. And when you don't have the ammunition to explain those pretty simple defenses, that reflects poorly on you. So I think her staff is probably like, okay, this is exactly why we've been trying to hide her. This is why it took her until September to finally do a debate. I think it was September 1st when she finally sat down with CNN. They knew this was coming. It's similar to the vein of what happened with Biden in 2020. His team knew that the more you put him out there, the less people will like him. And they did a pretty good job of shielding Biden. But I think what happened with Harris, her campaign started out pretty strong. If you look at polling and some leaked internal polling, it's no longer strong at all. She's struggling in most of the 7 key battleground states. So I think this last minute media blitz is desperate. And I think the sit down with Bret Baier was really desperate and it backfired. I don't think she helped herself at all.
No, she didn't. I'm glad you brought up Joe Biden because one of the best moments of that interview when Bret Baier, and I don't think she's ever actually been asked this before, at least not so explicitly, what she thought about Joe Biden and how she covered for his cognitive failings. And when she noticed that he was maybe slipping, and she paused there and she was real angry at that question. And then it was a visible, it was a noticeable, it was an audible pause where she didn't quite know what to say there. And then he hit her back with, hey, there's other people in the orbit of Joe Biden that are his friends, George Clooney and others, Nancy Pelosi, that are like, hey, this guy can't play ball anymore. And you had to have seen that. And she's just like, couldn't say anything. I mean, she looked and then she got angry. And that's the thing, too. And I know that that's where the left is going to cry, sexist. You can't say a woman's angry. No, she was visibly angry. There are times when Donald Trump is challenged and he fights back or he hits back, maybe even takes a low blow, but he doesn't look visibly rattled. She looked visibly rattled. And Tim Walz obviously always looks visibly rattled. He did during that VP debate. But I'm wondering, for those who watched her in that conversation, in that interview, and they saw her get so angry by being questioned, do you think some people are maybe going to change their mind about her and people that liked her because she was joyous and vibalicious?
Yeah, because I think already we're seeing people realize that they were duped. The people who bought into the repackaging of Harris post, was it July 22nd when Biden bowed out of the race? She ran on joy. There was nothing joyful about Kamala Harris last night. There was nothing joyful about her when she did that debate last month and it was a 3-on-1 ambush, but she still seemed visibly unhappy and awkward. A lot of us, including me, have jabbed her for her obnoxious and signature cackle, but I don't think that cackle's real. It's more of a sign of nervousness and being uncomfortable. And it goes back to what I said. She can't handle being challenged because she never has been. Her entire career, she has ridden up the elevator without taking the necessary steps. From what I can verify, Tomi, she's never held a job in the private sector. She got her start in politics because of a pretty well-documented relationship with Willie Brown. She was the right skin color and gender at the right time. And by the time they realized Biden couldn't run, she was the only candidate left who could inherit his $300 million plus war chest. She's been an opportunistic, pretty fortunate woman her entire life. So when you make her defend herself and hold her accountable, she just can't do it. And what does that say about potentially running the country? I think last night's interview is probably going to be seen by, I don't know, close to 8-9 million people. The clips are going to be widely spread. I think that does hurt her because in an election that the polls still say is a toss-up, every little thing mattered. And last night was not a win for her, and that will matter.
Yeah, I think more people see her and more people dislike what they see, and she comes across as unprepared. And you'd think at this point you have all the resources when you've got $1 billion in the bank. Like, you should have the resources to have at least a little bit of knowledge beyond just the talking points that she repeats, because that's really all she does. It's the repetition of the talking points that she's been told. It's her get out of jail free card. And with everybody else outside of Bret Baier and Fox News, just saying those little things gets her off the hook. She can be like, oh, I wanted to do this. Okay, off the hook. On to the next thing. Okay, off the hook. But he wouldn't let her off the hook, and it just showed that she's not prepared for this. And I will give this to other Democrats out there, like the Nancy Pelosi's and the Hillary Clintons and the Barack Obamas. I might not agree with what they say when they're challenged, but at least they give me something. She's got a nothing. But after that, I mean, I think it's a great day. Last night was great for me for one reason and horrible for me for another. One, that interview was fantastic. Two, the Mets lost and it was horrible. So that was a bad night for me. Going to come back tonight. It's okay. But I do want to move on to some sports talk with you, because obviously that's our brand. That's OutKick. And I know that you obviously follow this stuff very closely. So I want to dig into some more controversial issues, tie them into politics as well, because they're important. Yesterday, Donald Trump did a town hall with Harris Faulkner, and it was an all-female town hall. And there was a mother that asked about men and women's sports. And Donald Trump said, of course, that he would ban it. I don't know if he can just ban it. I don't know if he has the power to do that. However, I think it's important that your chief executive says this is unacceptable, and you can put the pressure where the pressure should be, unlike Joe Biden, who spits and stomps all over Title IX. But I'm wondering your thought on maybe the changing of the tide here, with Nevada volleyball players saying, you know what, we're not going to play, and several other schools saying, listen, we're not going to play. There's a dude on the team. Do you think this is finally coming to a head?
Well, yeah, so there's a lot here. The geographical consequences of the volleyball team is very interesting. I've been writing and tracking and projecting the electoral map here for 3 months. I actually think Kamala Harris is in a really good spot in Nevada, and I'm curious if this would have any impact. And people might say, well, Bobby, maybe you're overreacting. Here's the thing. According to Gallup and YouGov, around 72% of Americans agree with Donald Trump, which is men should not play sports with women. Again, 72%. That includes a lot of Democratic voters, including female Democratic voters who overwhelmingly support Harris based on most mainstream polling. This is another message, I think, that really goes against the direction of the Democratic Party. This whole idea is just nonsense. I have a lot of issues with the transgender movement. Maybe we'll get into it. I think it's a very consequential and devastating just overall idea and what it's doing to actual transgender people. But if you want to just stick to the sports aspect, this idea that men and women and male and female are the same and that there is no severe results of mixing and matching, it's just something that doesn't register to anyone who deals in common sense. I always fall back on this, Tomi. I have a grandfather. He passed away a few years ago. He never followed the news. He was just an ordinary guy who I thought dealt in common sense. If I would have told him 5 years ago that there is a dispute about men playing sports with women, he would think I was joking. He would say, no way can that happen in this America, but it's happening. And by and large, most people on the left support it, despite a lot of their supporters disagreeing with them. And hopefully President Trump coming out and saying that will get people to realize, wait a minute, even if I have some issues with him on that topic, he's right, because this is really not a left-right issue. It seems like a sane versus sane issue.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. But there's still that pop culture element that wants to push the trans stuff on everybody. Victoria's Secret did very poorly after it decided to go woke, after it decided to maybe put some more voluptuous models out there. They wanted to appeal to everybody. They wanted to be diverse. Nothing wrong with diversity, but know your audience, know your brand, right? And so they got a lot of pushback for that. And then they vowed to kind of go back to the original Victoria's Secret model being both literal and figurative. And they said, we're going to bring back the fashion show. We're going to have this be about the angels. We're going to have it be what everybody knows Victoria's Secret to be. But then they just couldn't help themselves, because they got the fashion show and they got to put two men on that stage masquerading as women. And, I think everybody can participate in things. I'm not one of those people that wants to be a prude about this. Fine. But I'm just wondering, from a business standpoint, do you think this resonates with the customer? I don't know, Bobby, if you are the customer. Maybe I'm more the customer. But OutKick is certainly deals in pop culture and in, scantily clad women. So I'm wondering, from your perspective as an OutKick writer, do you think this was a miss?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw last year, to go back further, because this has become a political issue, I guess, conservative consumers have long pretty much ignored the political preferences of a company or brand because so many are rooted against them. However, we saw last year, conservative consumers really fought back. We know what happened with Bud Light. The same with Disney, Target, Starbucks. A lot of Americans said, no, we're not going to continue to support a brand that really shares a strong disdain for our beliefs. And this transgender topic is really polarizing. It's not about inclusion or diversity. There are a lot of people like me who just think it's dangerous. There was a recent Heritage report that came out describing the lifelong, perpetual, and chronic pain of transgender adults who go through genital mutilation because their body and nerves still treat their body parts like they're there, but of course they're butchered off. So what's happening here is when you have Victoria's Secret promoting transgenderism, it's not about black or white or male or female. It's about, wait a minute, you are trying to normalize and make popular a movement that is severely dangerous. And that's where I push back at it to really a great extent. I was actually on radio last night with Sirius saying it's one thing to demand a brand represent somebody's skin color. It can be unnecessary, but it's usually harmless. Transgenderism is not harmless. So if Victoria's Secret wants to let everybody know where they stand, there are going to be some consumers who say, all right, you promote that, we're not going to get behind that. And business-wise, that's a very negative proposition.
And also, Victoria's Secret is a women's brand for women. And once again, it just feels like they're trying to erase actual women. There could have been two female models out there modeling for a women's lingerie line, but they said, no, you know what? Long live the patriarchy. Let's put a couple men out there. And, as a woman who's not a feminist, I'm really shocked that the feminists aren't a little bit pissed off that they are being replaced. Long live the patriarchy, I guess. Last thing I want to talk to you about, because I got to get my sports stuff in here, is there's a headline that OutKick obviously ran as well. Angel Reese, she's complaining again, and this time she's complaining because she can't pay her $8,000 a month rent with her WNBA salary. Now, I just cry so many tears for Angel Reese on a daily basis. Sometimes it's really difficult for me to get through the day. But I'm wondering what you think about this and where you think the WNBA is heading. They hate Caitlin Clark because she's a white, straight woman. But, she's really all they have. And I'm not sure Angel Reese can carry the weight of that league by herself.
Yeah, and first of all, I didn't know that. You said $8,000 a month for rent.
$8,000 a month.
So a little inside baseball here. She lives in Chicago. I know that area very well. There's some very, very nice condos and apartments for much cheaper than $8,000 a month. So I don't know where she's living in Chicago, maybe the Gold Coast, but she could certainly find a cheaper apartment that's adequate. So that's point number one. Yeah, this whole WNBA thing, it's all such a lie. We hear over and over again that Black women like Angel Reese are harassed online and Caitlin Clark's privilege. It's not true. First of all, the reason that Angel Reese is criticized by anonymous trolls is, one, she's a public figure. all public figures get criticism. And two, she continues to say really outlandish things and tries to portray herself as a victim. So yeah, there are people saying, well, do you need an $8,000 a month apartment? And then you're going to have a lot of people on TV say, how dare they question a Black woman's preference of where she lives? So it's really emblematic of, I think, a much larger societal problem, is that we don't know how to talk about race because we are supposed to follow this hierarchy of victimhood where if somebody's historically more marginalized than you, you can never criticize them. You have to hold them up on a pedestal. I don't subscribe to that. Maybe that's why people online don't like me. But she is really the poster child for this wannabe victim mentality, and she's not at all.
Yeah. To me, just the entirety of the WNBA first complaining that they weren't flying private and they're flying private, but the planes are too small. I mean, it's pretty whiny for a league that's still, even with Caitlin Clark, not that popular. Now, Caitlin Clark is making a big impact. There's no doubt about it, but
not at all.
I don't know how long that's even going to last. And I think she's a fantastic athlete, and I mean, go girl, but I think that there was a newness of it, and people were really excited to see her because they were fans of her in college, and then they wanted to see what she was able to do, and it obviously brought a lot of eyeballs. That's great. I do, though, have a little bit of skepticism of how long that's going to last, because I just don't think that league can just be supported by one major star. I think it's going to fizzle out, and then they're going to be back to riding the bus, and then they're probably going to blame Caitlin Clark for that too. So, I mean, best of luck to them. I hope that they can sustain their league and they don't have to be entirely funded by, the NBA. That would be nice. Bobby, what do you got on OutKick coming out that we should be paying attention to in some of your great articles, your great writing?
Appreciate it. So there's been a lot of talk about the poly market betting odds. Last I checked, Donald Trump is up 22%. People want to know what that means. Are the betting odds accurate? Why are they so much different than the polls? I've reached out to the CEO of Poly Market. I want to do an interview with him next week and answer some of those questions, because the odds, or the public poll says this race is neck and neck. The odds in the betting market say Donald Trump has already pretty much won.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting to watch that. And a lot of people are tuned into it, especially sports fans. Like, they love a horse race. So we'll wait and see what happens. A couple weeks left to go. We'll see which polls are right, the betting markets or the polls. And boy, I hope the betting market is correct. Thanks, Bobby, for joining me today. I hope to have you back. Thanks for all of the work that you do for OutKick. And it's a great to be a part of the OutKick family. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Talk soon, Tommy.
All right, folks. Fact check. The FBI had to revise its crime stats. Tim Walz doesn't know much about guns or capitalism, and mainstream media members are really outdoing themselves in perhaps the most pathetic outburst of TDS we've seen since 2016. Oh, it's time for my losers of the week. When a Democrat tells you the economy is great, everything is actually super affordable, migrants aren't taking over apartment complexes, and crime is down, well, you might want to take that with the largest grain of salt you can find. In fact, you might want to drink the entire Dead Sea worth of salt, because it's all a bunch of BS. Here's the fact check of the week you may or may not have heard from the mainstream media guardians of truth and light. That's right. The FBI quietly revised its crime stats, and guess what? Violent crime, in fact, did not fall in 2022 by 2.1%. It rose by about 4.5%, and that just includes the crime that was reported. So I guess that means ABC's David Muir owes Donald Trump a big, fat, juicy apology.
All over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made. Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me,
Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements.
Imagine that. We aren't crazy. Kamala's America is more violent. Violent crime is not falling, and we are being gaslit by a party and a campaign that thinks we are stupid. And these quiet little revisions aren't just done with crime stats, but you'll recall the Labor Department had to do the same thing with job growth back in August. So next time this administration tries to hit you with their rosy numbers, ask questions. Speaking of red flags, when a vice presidential candidate and current sitting governor admits he doesn't know jack about business and capitalism, well, we've got a major problem.
Senator Vance, he became a media darling. He wrote a book about the place he grew up, but the premise was trashing that place where he grew up rather than lifting it up. This guy's a venture capitalist cosplaying like he's a cowboy or something. I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time.
He thought he was dunking on J.D. Vance there, but he also thinks he's the picture of Midwest masculinity, so the delusions run real deep with that one. And guess where else you'll find a lot of delusion with a side of derangement? The mainstream media. Now, to their credit, they are starting to see the writing on the wall. Kamala's campaign is fizzling, and so they must kick their fear porn up a notch. I've created a little montage for you.
Because isn't it the identity of the immigrants? Like if you ask the question, would you like to deport European immigrants? Would you like to deport German immigrants? Would you like to deport it? And isn't it because the immigrants, because Trump is being very specific. He's saying Venezuela, Congo, and Haiti.
Yeah.
So he's identifying the immigrants as black and brown.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt this is absolutely right. He's not talking about Danish immigrants here, right?
Let's talk about fascism for a second.
Okay.
Because that came up also. I think that you covered this other part. This is the definition. It's defined as a political movement that embraces the far-right nationalism and the forceful suppression of any opposition, all overseen by an authoritarian government. That definition has Trump's picture next to it in the dictionary.
Right.
I mean, he wants to send the military to attack liberals if he gets in.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that Donald Trump says he doesn't drink, but this feels like drunken behavior. I think he's probably microdosing like his friend Elon Musk.
These people are going bananas with concern that Donald Trump will be reelected, and they are showing their instability in a more pathetic way than usual. And fact check on that last lady. Donald Trump does not drink and he does not do drugs. That's a well-known and established fact. Kamala, on the other hand, if she's saying the things she's saying, stone cold sober, my God, we are in trouble if she were to be elected. But those are my losers of the week. That does it for this episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Don't forget to tune in to Tyrus's interview with former President Donald Trump. You can catch it on OutKick.com tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern. Also, please be sure to tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern for a very special episode featuring Fox News chief foreign correspondent and author of Black Saturday, Trey Yingst. You don't want to miss this. Also, catch full episodes of this show on Fox Nation. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.